Welcome to the Explainer. Let's jump straight into a hypothetical, but honestly, pretty terrifying scenario. Picture a spring 2026 cruise ship outbreak that turns an absolute dream vacation into a complete nightmare. So imagine this. On April 1st, a cruise ship carrying about 150 passengers and crew from 23 different countries leaves Ushuaia, Argentina. They're heading out for this breathtaking journey to Antarctica and the remote islands of the South Atlantic. For the first few days, everything's perfect. People are mingling, enjoying the views, completely unaware that a deadly, invisible passenger has boarded right alongside them.
Just track the timeline here and see how fast things escalate. A few days into the trip, a 70-year-old Dutch passenger comes down with a sudden fever, a headache, maybe some mild diarrhea. He goes to the ship's doctor, but within a day or two, he can barely breathe. Tragically, by April 11th, he dies right there on the ship. Fast forward to April 26th. His grieving wife, who had left the ship with his body, suddenly collapses and dies while trying to catch a flight in South Africa. Then, a totally healthy German woman falls ill and dies by May 2nd. It was this rapid, baffling string of deaths that completely stumped the ship's doctors, until the World Health Organization finally stepped in and delivered a really chilling diagnosis: Hantavirus.
So how exactly did an isolated luxury ship turn into a hot zone? The authorities actually traced the origin back to March 2026, when that same Dutch couple went on a birdwatching tour in Argentina. During the tour, they wandered into an old, rodent-infested landfill. That's it. That simple detour brought a deadly pathogen aboard. And because the window of contagion is so incredibly narrow, if they had boarded that ship just 2 or 3 days later, the entire outbreak probably never would have happened.
All right, moving on to Section 1, Strains, Symptoms, and Survival.
Here is the number that really stops you in your tracks. Up to 50%. Let that sink in for a second. The mortality rate for certain strains of hantavirus can reach 50%. It's an incredibly lethal pathogen. Literally half of the people who contract the severe forms of this virus might not survive, which makes it a massive public health threat wherever it pops up.
And the reason it's so deadly is that hantavirus isn't just one single virus. It's actually a whole family of viruses carried by different types of rodents, and they cause two very different but equally devastating diseases. It's kind of a tale of two strains. On one side, mostly in Asia and Europe, you've got hemorrhagic fever with renal syndrome. This one viciously attacks the kidneys, causing them to fail and triggering severe internal bleeding. On the flip side, mostly in the Americas, we have hantavirus pulmonary syndrome. This strain targets the lungs, causing them to rapidly fill with fluid until the patient literally suffocates.
Now, what makes those symptoms even more terrifying is what happens when you get to the hospital. Because right now, there is absolutely no FDA or WHO-approved vaccine, no proven antiviral cure, none. Hospitals can only offer what's called supportive care. That means doctors can put you on a ventilator or dialysis to try and relieve your symptoms and keep your body running, but they can't actually kill the virus for you. Ultimately, it is entirely up to your own immune system to fight for its life.
Let's pivot now to Section 2, History of the Virus, From War to Weather.
Because honestly, the craziest part about hantavirus is that it isn't new. It's been hiding in the shadows, quietly striking humanity for over 70 years. Back in the 1950s, during the Korean War, over 3,000 American and UN soldiers suddenly got incredibly sick with fever, vomiting, and kidney failure. About 15% of them died from what they called Korean hemorrhagic fever. Doctors were totally stumped. Was it a new disease? A chemical weapon? It actually wasn't until the 1980s that a virologist finally linked it to rodents near the Hantan River. Then, jumped to 1993 in the American Southwest. A sudden, unexplained cluster of completely healthy young people from the Navajo Nation started dying rapidly as their lungs filled with fluid, and initially the mortality rate there was a staggering 75%.
Scientists were scrambling to crack the code of that 1993 outbreak, but it was actually the tribal elders who solved the mystery. They pointed out this wild chain reaction driven by El Niño weather patterns. Basically, heavy rains from El Niño caused a massive boom in pine nuts. That created an all-you-can-eat buffet for local rodents, which led to a massive population explosion. And, as you can guess, way more rodents meant a drastically higher chance of the virus spilling over into the humans sharing that same environment.
Think it's just a problem in the Americas or East Asia? Nope. For a long time, scientists thought India was completely free of hantavirus. But a major study between 2005 and 2008 in the Vellore district proved it's been quietly circulating there too. They found hantavirus antibodies in warehouse workers and members of the Irula tribe, who traditionally work as rat catchers. Almost 4% of the general population they tested had antibodies. That means they had been infected, fought it off, and survived without even knowing what hit them.
Which brings us to Section 3. Will it cause a pandemic?
With all these global outbreaks, it's totally natural to wonder if we're staring down the barrel of the next global catastrophe. To answer that, we have to look at the Andes strain. Remember that 1996 outbreak in Argentina? That shattered everything scientists thought they knew. Until then, the assumption was you could only get hantavirus directly from a rodent. But the Andes strain proved it could jump from human to human. This is the exact strain that infected our hypothetical cruise ship. And it's terrifying because data shows some infected individuals can act as superspreaders, passing the virus on to multiple people they're in close contact with.
But let's take a collective breath here. The World Health Organization considers the global risk to be very low. Why? Because unlike COVID-19 or the flu, hantavirus doesn't just float through the air across a crowded room. Human-to-human transmission requires really close, prolonged physical contact. We're talking sharing a bed or coming into direct contact with bodily fluids. Plus, the transmission window is insanely short. An infected person is typically only contagious for a single day right at the onset of their illness.
So, a global lockdown? Highly unlikely. But because the mortality rate is so incredibly high, protecting yourself on an individual level is absolutely crucial. Let's look at Section 4, rodent-proofing your home.
This checklist right here is your first line of defense. Remember, rodents are the primary vector. If you cut off their entry points and their food supply, the rodents carrying the virus won't have a reason to come inside. You've got to do a sweep of your property. Seal up any structural gaps, cracks, or holes. And I mean small ones, because mice can squeeze through unbelievably tiny spaces. Inside, make sure all your pantry items are locked down in heavy-duty, airtight containers, and never, ever leave your garbage exposed.
Now, moving to Section 5, high-risk travel environments.
What if you leave your perfectly safe, rodent-proofed home for a vacation? Kind of like that unfortunate Dutch couple. Travelers have to stay hyper-vigilant. If you're renting a remote cabin or exploring an old rural building, follow these steps. First, look for the telltale signs. Rodent droppings. If you see them, you are officially in a high-risk environment. Actively avoid poking around old, abandoned storage rooms, barns, or landfills. And if you absolutely have to go into a dusty, enclosed space that's been boarded up for a while, throw on an N95 mask and some gloves. The virus is shed in rodent urine and droppings, and just sweeping the floor can kick that deadly dust right up into the air you breathe.
Ultimately, your safety comes down to these essential hygiene practices. They're basically your everyday armor against any rodent-borne infection. Just don't leave food exposed on counters or picnic tables. Wash your hands thoroughly and frequently, especially after you've been hiking outdoors or cleaning out the garage. By just eliminating the things that attract rodents to where you sleep and eat, you are drastically reducing your statistical risk of ever coming face-to-face with this pathogen.
Because here's the bottom line. Hantavirus is a silent threat. It only really makes global news when these sudden, tragic clusters of death happen, like a military outbreak, a weird weather anomaly, or a doomed cruise ship. But the reality is, it's been hiding in the shadows, quietly impacting lives for decades. Without a vaccine or a magic cure, awareness and prevention are quite literally our only weapons.